We're standing in front of the old Winecoff Hotel. On the morning of December 7th, 1946, right here on Peachtree Street, 280 people were sleeping. 119 of them would lose their life in what is still the worst hotel fire in U.S. history. The people that were staying here believed that they were staying in the safest hotel in Atlanta, and perhaps the safest hotel in America. They'd seen it on the billboards when they came into Atlanta. Signs that said, "Stay at the Winecoff, absolutely fireproof." The hotel had neither fire escapes, fire doors to seal the stairwells, nor sprinklers. They had gotten through that by being grandfathered in by various city laws. Now, the fire broke out, the first alarm went out at 3:42. It quickly became a general alarm where fire engines from throughout the city and surrounding communities convened here at the corner of Peachtree and Ellis Street. The guests that were here were trapped. The aerial ladders that the city had at that time, any aerial ladders at that time, reached only so high. In this case, it reached only to the 7th floor. This was a 15-story building. Anyone above the 7th floor on this front side of the building, was trapped. Also on the front of the hotel, there is a ledge up just below the 14th floor. 5 people scaled that ledge to move from the left side, the south corner, to the north corner, the left side to the right. Why did they risk their lives? That ledge is approximately 8 inches. They risked their lives because the smoke that morning, a cool December morning, was blowing toward the south, up toward the corner they were in, and as they hung their head out the window, they knew they could not survive if they stayed there. So they walked all the way across that ledge to the other side. On the south side of the hotel, there was no means of escape. No one above from the 8th floor up survived on the south side of the hotel. There were no ladders that could reach that part of that side of the building. And unfortunately, those rooms, there was one big room on the south side, and it had 2 double beds, so teenagers could bunk in there for 4 to a room. Families could move in there, save money. Well, there were a lot of teenagers in the hotel that night. 40 of them were, out of the 280 people, were teenagers. They were among the best and brightest students from throughout Georgia. They had come here to attend a youth assembly, a mock state legislature put on by the YMCA. Out of the 40 that were here, 30 of them died, primarily because they were either on the back side, but mostly on this south side of the hotel. And one of the things that drew immediate attention around the country to the tremendous tragedy of this fire was a picture taken by a Georgia Tech graduate student named Arnold Hardy. Hardy was an amateur photographer. He was staying up West Peachtree, north of here, West Peachtree Street, 15 blocks or so, in an apartment house. When that morning around, 3:45, 4 o'clock, he began hearing all the sirens. So he went outside, grabbed a taxi, came down Peachtree Street as far as he could, walked the final 2 or 3 blocks, and stood here about where I am standing now and aimed his camera. He had 7 flash bulbs that day. He took one shot that showed the people on the front side of the building awaiting rescue, a futile looking, waiting and hoping. And then with his last flash bulb, he took a picture of a woman falling from one of the upper floors. He caught her in midair. That picture many of you have probably seen before. It won the Pulitzer Prize that year, for Pulitzer Prize in 1947 for photos taken in 1946. It showed what Mr. Hardy said, that once he got here and he saw the absolute futility of what was going on, that he thought if somehow he could take a picture that captured the desperation of this situation, that perhaps it would help in it not being repeated again. When the fire was finally out, about 6 o'clock in the morning, they began to bring in investigators. Word went throughout the country. And it was the best arson investigators in the country came in here. The mayor of Atlanta, Mr. Hartsfield, invited fire inspectors from all over the nation to come here and see what had happened, see what could be learned. The arson investigators quickly, after much study, they sensed it was arson to start with because it had spread so quickly, starting on the 3rd floor. And their reports that would come out in the months after would reveal that it was arson. Most of this was lost in the media coverage at that time, simply because Atlanta wanted to move on. And there was another factor. The 3rd floor was the site of a poker game, sort of a traveling group of professional gamblers that would move from one hotel to another in Atlanta at that time, stay 2 weeks at a time at a hotel. The lowest floor is the 3rd that we see here is the 3rd floor, and that's where the poker game was. That's room 330. Now, at the time, there were adjoining mercantile buildings right here, a shoe store, and the roof of the shoe store went up to where those vents now are. Those vents were not there at the time of the fire. And so when the fire broke out right there on the 3rd floor, the gamblers were of course trapped. They came out the windows very easily, jumped up onto the roof next door. You know, they had to crawl up about 4 or 5 feet onto the roof, then went to the back of the roof, the back side of the building, of the shoe store, and went down a fire escape down into the alley to safety. And they were gone before the fire trucks were even here. Although truth was never served in getting to the real source of the fire, Mayor Hartsfield's ploy did work. By inviting in investigators, this fire became a watershed mark in fire safety history. We have all been much safer when we've gone into high-rise buildings since then, whether it be a hotel or office building, because of what took place here. The building, after sitting vacant and getting cleaned up for several years, the building did reopen as a hotel in the early 50s, calling itself the Peachtree on Peachtree. It later, in the late 60s, became a retirement home for senior citizens run by the Southern Baptist Convention. They moved out to the suburbs in 1982. Leaving this historic building vacant, abandoned, a real eyesore on Peachtree Street for the next 25 years. The Ellis Hotel opened in this building in 2007 and is doing business here now. It is a boutique hotel. It has tried to keep the historical perspective, and the windows have not been changed, the hallways have not been changed. The history of the building is still remembered by a marker on the south side of the building. This marker was put there, or was put in front of the building in 1994 by survivors and the families of the victims.